Act 1, Scene 5, and we finally meet Lady Macbeth. She comes onto the stage reading a letter that she's received from her husband, which details his victory in the battle, how he met the witches, and then the witches' prophecies. And she's excited by this, and her brain starts ticking, and she starts sort of thinking about all these wonderful things. We then see that soliloquy from her where she calls upon the spirits before Macbeth's arrival, where she then takes control and says that she will orchestrate the demise of Duncan. She's an absolutely fascinating character, and the words on the left-hand side of this screen will help you to think about how we can describe her. She's Machiavellian, devious, narcissistic, she's calculating, ambitious, immoral. All of these gorgeous words to describe her, because she is so complex as a character. She is a brilliant, brilliant character to study, and certainly one of my favourites to look into. Many different directors will read into her character in different ways. Again, linking back to the fact that she's so fascinating to study. Perhaps the most recent version, the Fassbender version, shows her much more as a victim, as sort of a grieving mother, and really emphasises the fact that she doesn't have any children, and exploits that part of her character and her vulnerabilities. Other interpretations will see her as a very sexual being, that she will be using her sexuality to get what she wants. Other times she's portrayed as quite cold and quite heartless, and very, very much the dominating person in the relationship, and she can be seen as very evil. So as you read this scene, think about that. Think about how you would interpret her. What jumps out to you about her character at this point in the play? Getting into the text now. Obviously, we see the letter that is read detailing what has happened from Macbeth's point of view. And the key piece of information that we can interpret from this section of the text is the way that he refers to her as my dearest partner of greatness. This is significant because it outlines her as an equal in the relationship, which might not be a common interpretation of relationships at that time. And her response is what really intrigues me when I look at this. She immediately goes to this idea of you will be what you're promised. The verb shall there is a modal verb, and it's a degree of certainty. So she is saying that this will come true. It's almost prophetic, witch-like in the way that she pronounces it. She has no doubt that he will become the king. But then she goes on to be quite scathing of him. She says she fears his nature. She worries that he's too full of the milk of human kindness, that he is, although he's got ambition, he's without that edge that you would need to do what it takes. He's not got that illness, that foulness about him at this point, in order for him to actually go through with the abhorrent regicide, that he wouldn't do this because he's just not evil enough. And so she ends this first section of the scene by saying, hie thee hither, get here quickly, so that I may pour my spirits in thine ear, and chastise with the valour of my tongue all that impedes thee from the golden round. She's saying that she wants him to arrive so that she can begin to manipulate him, so that she can begin to chastise away, she can begin to convince him that all of those fears that might stop him don't need to get in his way, that he will be able to get the golden round, the crown. And she's excited by this, and she wants him to get there as quickly as he can so she can begin her work. So she's been interrupted from her train of thought by a messenger who arrives and says that King Duncan is on his way, that he's going to be coming, and he's going to come and stay with him at the castle. And she's really excited. She says, go and look after the messenger. He brings great news. And this is a turning point for her character, because this is when we see that darkness within her. And in the yellow bit that I've highlighted for you here, I want you just to note that bird imagery, the imagery of the birds, because that's a recurring motif throughout the text. We've already seen the captain talk about the sparrow overcoming the eagle. So we've already had a slight introduction to the idea of birds. But this time it's a much darker messenger. As Lady Macbeth announces, the raven himself is hoarse that croaks the fatal entrance of Duncan under my battlements. And the raven we associate with evilness and darkness and death. So it's prophetic again in the way that she's communicating. She's talking about Duncan's fatal entrance. She's already decided that Duncan is going to die in their castle tonight. That is her plan. And she then goes on to say these iconic lines: "Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here and fill me from the crown to the toe, top full of direst cruelty." She's commanding. That use of that imperative sentence, the commanding sentence here, shows perhaps how powerful she is, and that she has this command over the supernatural. She wants the spirits to come and take away her sexuality, to take away everything that makes her female. Be really careful here. She's not asking to become more like a man. What she wants is to be stripped of her femininity, to be stripped of everything that makes her human. And in its place, she wants to be filled with the direst cruelty. Not just cruelty, the direst cruelty, the darkest cruelty. She wants to be full of evil. She wants her access and passage to be stopped up. Okay, because again, that is a quality that makes her feminine. She's alluding to the idea of being a woman, to having a womb, and she wants that stopped up. She doesn't want the visitings of nature, the monthly visitings of nature, to shake her purpose. She doesn't want any of that softness or kindness that we associate with women to be getting in her way. She goes further than this, though, and she says again, "Come to my woman's breast and take my milk for gall, you murdering ministers." So that natural imagery of a woman breastfeeding her baby is taken and poisoned. She wants to be her breast milk to be replaced with poison. So we're seeing a real evil side to her. And then for the third time, she says, "Come thick night." So the third imperative, that repeated imperative, showing the command that she has, showing her power. Or if you want to go on alternative route, perhaps showing how desperate she is. It highlights her ambition and what she's prepared to do in order to make sure that Macbeth can become the king. And she says, "Come thick night and pull thee in the dunnest smoke of hell, that my keen knife see not the wound it makes." And I want you to link this idea back to Macbeth's earlier idea when he first heard about it, when he says, "Stars hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires." It's that same image of darkness covering the Macbeth so they can get away with murder. She talks about being covered, being palled in the dunnest smoke of hell, the darkest smoke of hell, so that my keen knife, she's taking ownership here. Okay, this is not about Macbeth's keen knife, her keen knife. She is well and truly prepared to do this. She is prepared to be the one who kills the king. And she wants the darkness to cover her so that that doesn't get revealed. And now finally, in this last section of the scene, we see Lady Macbeth and Macbeth together for the first time. He has ridden ahead of Duncan and Banquo and the other thanes who've been involved in the battle in order to go and speak with Lady Macbeth before the king's arrival. And Lady Macbeth is so pleased to see him. Look at the note, the exclamation marks that you've got here. "Great Glamis, worthy Cawdor, greater than both by the all hail hereafter." She is incredibly pleased to see him. And she says that his letters that he's written for her have transported her beyond the ignorant present, and she feels now the future in an instant. So we're going to go back to the idea of her coming across as prophetic, as witch-like. She's talking about the fact she feels the future is happening. She feels that she's gone beyond the human knowledge. She's been transported into a place where she can sense everything that's happening. And Macbeth is pleased to see her too. He says, "My dearest love." And so we see that relationship, that equality, that pleasure that they have spending time together, and the closeness of their bond, which is really important to note because we're going to see that deteriorate very, very quickly. By the time we get to Act 3, Scene 2, the relationship is already fractured. And Lady Macbeth then asks Macbeth, when does Duncan arrive and when does he leave? And Duncan says, "Oh, he plans to go tomorrow." And she says, "Well, never shall sun that morrow see." So the idea, and we've talked about this previously, this idea of the sun setting, the ending of the day being that metaphor for the ending of life. Okay, and if we think back to Act 1, Scene 1 with the witches, when they say that will be ere the set of sun, it's that idea that the sun setting is representative of the ending of life. And so Lady Macbeth is saying to Macbeth straight away that Duncan is not going to leave their castle, that they are going to do something to prevent him from leaving. They're going to kill him. And then she chastises him. She goes back to that point where she is in a position of power, and she starts instructing him on how to behave. She says, to beguile the time, look like the time. Look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent underneath it. And then slightly further down, to alter favour ever is to fear. These ideas of having to be duplicitous, that they need to act like the perfect host, the innocent flower, the vulnerable people that they want to portray, but underneath that, be the serpent, be the devil, have the evil about you to complete these acts. Remember that connection to the serpent in the Garden of Eden, which is interesting if we look at that idea, because we know that it was Eve who brought about Adam's downfall in the Garden of Eden by being tempted to eat from the tree of knowledge. And we see this imagery come through here. And as a Jacobean audience, we would be worried, because we would connect that religious imagery and it would concern us, because we would think that she is going to be orchestrating Macbeth's downfall. And she talks about this night's great business, leaving it all the rest to me. So she is the orchestrator here. She is the person who is plotting, she's scheming, she's putting the plans into place to do what it's going to take. So she's quite a frightening character here. And if we think back to those words that we looked at the start of this mini teach, narcissistic, the idea of her having a very self-importance, that she's in love with herself, that she believes herself to be above reproach. She's Machiavellian, she's scheming, she's prepared to win at all costs. She's immoral, she's talking about killing the king. She's ruthless and callous and dominant here. So do we see her as a strong, fiercely independent woman? Do we see her as cunning and deceptive? Or does it come from a place of love? Is this about ambition and wanting her husband to be the best that he can be? You know, which aspects of her character do we really see come through? And what's her motivation? If we can think about why she wants to do this and why she's so determined to become the queen and for Macbeth to become the king, perhaps that can unlock a little bit more about her character. And so to work with the scene, again, stick with that format, draw it, imagine it, write it, analyse it. Some of the tasks you might want to think about is drawing that pictogram of Lady Macbeth calling the spirits, surround it with those key quotations, make sure you've got those nailed down. Imagine it, think about how you would direct her, which aspects of Lady Macbeth's character would you want your actor to bring to the forefront? How would you have her tone of voice? Which words would you have her emphasising? Are you going to go for desperate and vulnerable? Would you go for powerful and dominant? Would you go for that more sexual aspect? Think about what you see from the text and then how you would have somebody act that out. Perhaps this is a good opportunity to think about practicing those creative writing skills for your language paper. Turn this scene into a short story. Remember to add as much description as you can to try and capture that sinister nature of the scene. And if it's a story, could you do it without using speech? So try and convey these ideas without actually just copying out the conversation. Or maybe you want to go back to that idea of analysing it and practicing those analytical skills. In this instance, you'd be looking at how does Shakespeare present Lady Macbeth as powerful in this scene. So you're looking for the modal verbs, you're looking for the repetition, you're looking for the imperatives, you're looking for the way that she communicates her ideas and the command that she has over her language and the vocabulary that she uses. Make sure you know this scene, it's absolutely key.